Would you like to accelerate your career and reach your full potential in just minutes a day? Welcome to the LEADx Show with New York Times best-selling author and Inc. 500 entrepreneur, Kevin Kruse.
How can hyper-cannibalism give us a competitive advantage? Hello everyone, Kevin Kruse here, and in just a minute we're going to talk about ways to drive innovation. But first, congratulations on being a lifelong learner. You're listening to the LEADx Show as you're jogging in the morning, or maybe you're turning it on as you turn on your car and drive to work in the morning. But either way, you know that the LEADx Show is how you are going to stand out and get ahead. So tell your friends at work, LEADx is the smartest way to start your day. Today's 1-minute career tip is close your open door policy. Now, we all know an open door policy is supposed to facilitate communication and make sure everyone can get help when they need it, but there are many problems. First of all, open door policy kills a manager's productivity, always getting interrupted with those got-a-minute meetings. Second, it can foster over-dependence as people are always coming through that door asking for advice or permission. And third, just because your door is physically open doesn't mean that people, kind of feel that there's a climate of trust and that they can truly walk through it. So instead of a wide open door policy, maybe just have office hours. And whether it's from 4 to 5 every day or all day on Friday, you get to set the time, but then you also get to work on that deep work in an uninterrupted fashion during other times. And supplement the open door policy with one-on-one meetings. I like to do them, weekly with my direct reports. When they're done right, they'll go a long way to coaching and developing your people, and everybody stays aligned and they won't have that need to come through that open door. Before I introduce our guest, finally, I want to say big thanks to all of you who have subscribed on iTunes, left a short review. It only takes a minute to do it, but it's the single best favor you can do for me. Over the past decade with Deloitte, our guest has been recognized globally for his work in the area of innovation. He shares his hands-on experiences through talks around the world to help leaders navigate change within this crazy digital era we're all living in. In 2016, he was named to Avenue Magazine's Top 40 Under 40 list. He also co-hosts The Dip, a podcast focused on strategy, marketing, and innovation. Our guest is Shawn Kanungo. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Kevin, I am so stoked to be on here. A little bit of a backstory. I emailed you because, I was in love with the Extreme Productivity podcast. And then, I think we traded a few emails, and I'm on here today, and I'm completely, stoked to be on here. It's an honor, to be honest with you.
No, it's great to have you on, and I'm glad you shared that story because, of course, something I talk a lot about is just sort of always making time for everybody, for connections, to try to just help others and be a decent human being. And I think a lot of people don't realize I really do read and respond to all my email. And
you do, yes.
This was just a great, not everybody ends up as a guest on the show, but in this case, I definitely liked your email, checked out your background, and said, you'll have some value bombs for us. And so it's great to have you. Now, Shawn, we're going to talk about innovation in a minute, but I always start, of course, with the failure question because I want us to learn from your pain. So share a time when you failed at something, maybe early in your career, and what did you learn from it?
Absolutely. And, I think it's been a theme throughout your interviews that people, say, they've failed multiple times.
Right.
And I'm no exception. I think I'll go back to, one of the things that I did outside of Deloitte, my friends and I, we were in the mobile app game. And when the mobile app game was hot, in 2012, 2013, when actually people downloaded apps, today no one actually downloads apps, we were playing in this game just to test consumer behavior and understand, what people wanted. And, we created this app called Roman. And, the concept of Roman was, it was pretty unique. What you would do is you would take a picture and then you would send it to your friend. Maybe it was a goofy picture. And then it would automatically record a 3-second video reaction and it would send it right back to you. And then everything would disappear just like Snapchat. And so the concept of the app was basically you would share that magic of sharing a picture with somebody basically in real time. If I showed you a picture of a baby, Kevin, you would immediately smile. So we want to capture that reaction in our app. And, when we actually tested it with people in the flesh, the beta tests were amazing. People were loving it. They were reacting. And we said, we had this epiphany. We had this vision that we would become, billionaires. Everyone would use our app everywhere around the world. We would be cruising. And so we rolled out the app and we saw, some amazing uptake on it. And then suddenly we saw it drop. And we suddenly saw the rates drop on our Parse app in the background. We saw people stop using it. And we want to understand why was that. And to really understand why people were not using the app, we decided to do some ethnographic research, basically following people in the wild. And so what we did was we went to a Starbucks and we sat there for a couple days just watching people and watching how people are just on their phones and how they react. And what we noticed is that when people are alone, when they're just, when they're not with anybody else and they're on their phone, whether they're scrolling through Instagram or they're looking at Snapchat or whatnot, they're actually not reacting. Huh. They aren't. They're just simply going through their phone. If it was something, radically funny or if it was something radically cute, then they might smile, but they're not going to have a overt reaction. And so what we realized was that we built an application that was actually generating inauthentic, reactions, right? Because when I'm with you, Kevin, and I show you a picture of my baby, you're obviously gonna say, "Oh, that's so cute." But when you're alone and I send you that picture of my baby, you might smile, but for the most part, you're not gonna react. And so what we were doing is we were actually creating an inauthentic experience, and we realized we're not gonna scale this thing. And right. you would see that there's apps that were produced, dumbstruck. Facebook got into this game. There's other people that got into the game, and I knew that every single one of them would fail. Subsequently after they launched after us, because the concept is not authentic. And it really taught me about consumer behavior, about actually doing ethnographic research, actually observing people in the wild before you roll out any single product or service. It's really truly understanding what people, what human behavior is all about.
Yeah, this is really, that's an incredible story, first of all. And because as you described the app, I'm thinking, geez, this is genius. Like, how come I haven't heard of this? This is really, really clever. Yeah. And then you, of course, get to the punchline. And especially for the entrepreneurs out there, that's something I've seen with my own companies and failed companies. And I see it as I've been, doing angel investing. It's real easy to get, what looks to be initial traction or positive feedback. And it depends on, what the situation is, but I've seen it where it's like, oh yeah, we showed it to all of our friends and family members and they loved it. Or yes, we drove traffic with these Facebook ads, or we did a deep discount for the first 100 customers and they all loved it. And, yes, you need some initial feedback, but it's not uncommon for then, as you say, I like that, in the wild, you don't get the same reaction. And it is just an interesting thing, Shawn, about the human nature. Cause as you're saying it, I'm like, you know what, even if I see like something really, really funny, like on my Facebook feed, if I'm alone, if it's really funny, I might smile or maybe one little chuckle. But if I'm hanging out with all my friends or, my kids are around or whatever it is, I am much more expressive and I laugh out loud and then I show it to them. It's a completely different experience.
Exactly. And, the reason why it didn't work in testing was that because we were there. Like we were watching the people, waiting for the reaction. So because there were other humans around during the beta testing, that's why they were reacting the way that they were. Because we were around and that was a mistake on our end. And, it was a huge failure because we invested so much money and time and effort and hopes and dreams into this thing. Right, and we killed it right away. Once we saw that people didn't react, like by their lonesome, like we killed it on the spot. We said, this is never going to work.
But that's great advice too, right? Like you've got to, it's a fine line between, hey, all that pep talk, don't give up and pursue your dreams and all that. But you've got to be realistic about the data you're getting and not, invest good time and money after bad.
Exactly.
Okay. So Shawn, let's get into some of this innovation stuff, because you're known globally for your views on innovation. You lecture on it all the time. And, one of the things you say in your talks, you say to be innovative, we need to think like a cannibal. So what do you mean by that?
Well, here's the punchline. Like, organizations are designed to be operationally efficient and operationally effective. Like, that's why we have really great processes and structure and governance and 30-minute meetings and cubicles. Like, in the industrial revolution, in the industrial age, like, people would look at our organizations today and they would say, wow, you run these organizations like a well-oiled machine. You guys are super efficient. But in today's world, we haven't really designed our organizations to be, to evolve, to rethink our products, our services, how we deliver, whether it's our products or services or information to our citizens or customers. Like, we haven't designed our organizations to evolve. And this idea of thinking like a cannibal basically means not to be so romantic about what's working today and continuously thinking about how will you disrupt what's working today in order to build a brighter and future tomorrow. This idea of cannibalization is a really simple example is Netflix, something that everybody has. Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, one of the hardest decisions that he ever had to make as a CEO of Netflix is when they were going from the DVD to streaming. Netflix was never sold on, DVD is our ticket. We're gonna live and die on DVDs. And the hardest decision that he had to make was when he literally had to kick out his DVD team from the main management meeting that he had, because the DVD team wasn't open to this whole idea of streaming. They weren't open to all this innovation and essentially what would disrupt their business. And at the time, the DVD team was making all the revenue and profit for the organization, and Reed had to kick them out of the meeting because they weren't open to it. And so, if you look at organizations today, many organizations have been around for 40, 50, 60 years, essentially doing the same thing. And today, technology is on an exponential scale, and now you actually have to rethink your organization. Like, you actually have to rethink how you do things, because the world has changed. And for me, I'm an innovation strategist, and my job requires me to go into organizations to challenge the status quo. Like, my job is to show organizations how I would take them out of business before somebody else does. And this is what people struggle with. They've spent all their lives, working on this business and working on the products that they're working on, not knowing that maybe that might not be relevant in the future. It's actually a hard thing to stomach. And
well, Shawn, this is amazing, because now I don't have the exact data at my fingertips, but I've read those stats around how many companies, which companies were in like the Fortune 100 decades and decades ago, and how few are today, right?
90% of the companies on the Fortune 500 in 1955 are no longer on the list today.
1955 to now, and they're almost all gone, right? And these are the biggest, most efficient companies that are out there. And as you're saying, I like what you said, fancy way to say what you do is your innovation strategy. Another way to say is you explain how you would put them out of business, right? I mean, if they're not going to do it to themselves, someone else is going to do it to them.
Yeah. And I think it goes beyond, I actually want to ask you this question, because I want to continue on this fact, not only from an organizational standpoint, but from an individual standpoint, is because you, Kevin, like, you're the master of productivity. Like, this is what people know you as, in terms of how to get that, extra 5-10%, out of your day. what I'm sort of trying to challenge organizations with is not the 5 to 10%, is actually how do you get the 5 to 10x increase? And so,
right.
I guess when it comes to you and when people ask you about productivity, is that part of what you're trying to do is trying to, radically rethink how they do things?
Well, I think they have to. I mean, so it's when I don't think I did a great job of it in the book, but when I go out and do talks now, up front early in the talk, whether it's a little workshop or usually it's like a keynote, I stop and I tell everybody, like I open, with the bold promise, something when it comes to productivity, it's usually something around, how would you like to get an extra hour out of every single day? Or how would you like to, double or even triple your productivity? And most people feel, I'm so busy, I've already know everything about time, like this is impossible. And so rather than it's a good public speaking thing to make this bold promise, but I was finding that people didn't believe it. Like they're just like, okay, this is ridiculous. So I would immediately then talk about cognitive dissonance. And I said, all right, listen, there's going to be a bunch of you, or they're going to listen to these crazy ideas I'm about ready to share with you and say, that's stupid. It won't work for me. Or he doesn't understand my industry, my job, my boss. Everybody's going to toss out their limiting beliefs to say why they can't live without a to-do list, for example, which is one of my main things. And so I talk about, listen, you're going to get some cognitive dissonance, and I'm just inviting you to keep an open mind. And then what I do is I put up a couple of slides from like a CEO or president of Omni Actives, which is a nutraceuticals company, went through one of my things.
Yeah.
And he said, his team members were there, and he says, Kevin, he says, I'm your best student. He said, because of what you taught me, I gained 6 hours out of every single day, and we got a 35% higher bump in our revenue than planned for this year. Now, I thought he was just full of it, right? Just like to get his people's attention. Like, this is ridiculous. I even think this is ridiculous. 6 extra hours a day, 35% increase year over year revenue. So I waited till his people left, Shawn. And I'm like, hey, I said, that was nice of you to say, but like, really, like what did you find? And he explained that by moving from the to-do list to the schedule, and then by realizing that he didn't need to be in all those meetings, he freed up the 6 hours a day. And what he started to do was slow down and think those big exponential thoughts, right? Back to what you're saying, Shawn, like, okay, how could we not increase by 10% our revenue? How could we 10x our revenue? If I was forced to do the same amount of revenue in 1/10 the time, how would I do that? And, one of the very quick things he realized was he needed to go do an acquisition, and he used these newfound hours to identify and go close a deal. And that's how they increased, like literally 6 months later, they increased the revenue by 35%. And he credits it all, with this thinking. And so I try to tell people, like, I could show up and say, hey, get 5% better with your productivity. And no one would really care. You just kind of lose them. But you go the other end and say, look, 10x your productivity, and they don't believe you. They need to know that it's possible. And so I think, whether it's us as individuals or organizationally, it's probably the same challenge, right? I mean, it's like, you can't just be a little bit innovative. It's not like let's just have a brainstorming meeting and bring in some creativity guy once every 5 years. Like, you really need to become a cannibal and realize you have to kill the most successful parts of your business with something better, right?
Exactly. I totally right. You just sparked something in me, thinking about listening to your podcast over time. I remember the number one productivity hack for Mark Cuban was actually to remove meetings. This is what I learned from your podcast. Right. And I, what I did afterwards? I actually I looked at all my meetings and I said, which are the ones that I actually don't need to part of, or I'm not going to add value on. And I can't tell you how amazing that piece of advice was. So I have to thank you about that, for that. And,
that's great. They took some action on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the other thing that I would say. So we're talking about organizations. I think this idea of becoming a cannibal actually translates into your own career. my parents, I'm East Indian. And as an East Indian growing up in North America, you were always told the only things that you could do is become a doctor, engineer, accountant, or lawyer. This is the only thing that you could do. Or you could marry a doctor. These jobs are safe. That's what they told me. These jobs are safe. And the crazy thing is that now that technology is on an exponential scale, like those jobs actually aren't safe anymore. And the jobs that not only is, being a doctor and an accountant, not only are those sort of jobs being disrupted by the democratization of information and automation and, all this stuff. I think if you think about your career, like you consistently have to be learning, being hungry and being curious. Just a quick story. I was helping an organization with a training strategy, like adult education. I was helping them with a strategy on what does the future of training, future of education look like for you. And there was 3 or 4 trainers and they had a team of 12. And I told them that, one of the things that they have to learn very simply was to learn how to edit, cut, and produce a video. As a trainer, like that's what you should be doing. And they told me, Shawn, when do we have the time to do this? Like, we're already busy. Our calendars are already full. And I told them, do you want a career in training? Because if you are not prepared to take the extra effort to learn about what's going to be disrupting your career or your business, the market is going to run over you. Like, it's harsh to say that if you don't learn, if you're not hungry to think about what's next, the market will run over you. You'll be out of luck.
Well, Shawn, you're preaching to the choir on this, and that's where I am sincerely fond of the listeners of the LEADx show who know like they need to be continuously learning, advancing. And people think like I'm just being silly, but I say the robots are coming for us, my friends. And by robot, I'm talking about, self-driving trucks and cars that are going to put a lot of drivers out of business. As you said, it used to be, that automation, those blue collar people are out of luck. No. Even, when a computer can now do the job of a radiologist, or even better than a radiologist in terms of identifying, scans and stuff. It's white collar jobs. We're all going to be disrupted by, AI, artificial intelligence, and, robots, for lack of a better word. But I would say that there's always going to be room, for the 10%, 20%, 30% of us, whatever it is, who will make that time, who will invest that time to say, I'm going to learn. I'm going to continue to learn to stay up on this edge. And it's going to be tough for everybody with automation, but that's probably the number one thing, is to be able to reinvent yourself and put that time in, even if you don't want to.
Kevin, what do you think about this? Because we're going to be in a very challenging spot in our economy. What are your thoughts on this idea that the robots are coming, people are going to be losing their jobs? What is that going to do to our economy? What is that going to do on things like retirement and pension and some of these things? I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Well, it's, look, I hope I'm wrong. And obviously technology advances in the past have always created as many or more jobs than they've displaced, right? So farm technology got rid of the family farmers, but everybody's eating, and, those people, that same number, not necessarily the same people, but the same number of people are now working, building smart tractors or whatever. It does feel different to me though now. Technology does not advance linearly. It's exponential. And so it's hard for me not to imagine that at some point the developed countries are going to have some kind of universal basic income. And how we can afford that or what that would look like, I don't know. It's a topic I'm fascinated by, but some of my most hardcore capitalist, super wealthy friends and stuff are all sort of seeing the same things and assuming that this is going to have to be, because we're not seeing how already, already the wealth gap and the knowledge and skill gap is getting bigger. It's huge. And so this is going to accelerate. So what happens? It's hard to imagine that we can't keep the society together without having some kind of basic universal income. What do you think?
You know what? This basic universal income is interesting. I've heard governments sort of thinking about this too. Here's what I think. Technology has always been around. It's always disrupted jobs. You know, there used to be some really nice people. They used to be switchboard operators. And when the phone technology got really good, like they went home. And there used to be some really nice guys. They used to be milkmen. And when the supply chain at the supermarkets got really good, like they went home too. So jobs will always be disrupted by new technologies. And for the most part, technology has actually created new jobs. It has actually assisted us to do more. People talk about this idea of, oh, things are going to be more automated and we're going to have more time for ourselves. Like, that has never happened. We are still working our asses off, and that will continue to happen. I think that's just human nature. We will continuously find new things to do. We'll try to get faster and better and more efficient with more technology. There is no part of this where technology is going to come in and we're going to chill, we're going to relax. One of the things that I do is I work with governments, really leading the charge on digital governments, on how do you enable innovation, not only within your organization, within government, but also play with the ecosystem, play with all these new technologies that are coming about, and allowing technology and society to move along in a way that is, sort of amicable and works. I think governments have to be more proactive around this, and they have to wake up, because if they don't understand sort of the changes that are happening, like, we're going to be in a tough spot. So I think it's industry, government, entrepreneurs, work together on all this innovation stuff.
Makes sense to me, and I think you're a little more optimistic than I am, and I'm glad you are, because I certainly don't want to be right. But Shawn, let me switch this up now. So, completely separate note. Like, you're a pretty young guy who's accomplished a lot. You have a great brand you developed around the innovation space. So, what advice would you have? Kind of like, again, in terms of thinking about the future, what advice would you have for people who are just starting out in their careers? Maybe they're in their early 20s or whatever. What's your advice? How can they stand out and get ahead in their career?
So, for me, and I appreciate that, 99.9% of your listeners will not know who I am. So I've just started my career in this space, 11 years in the innovation space and counting. For me, it's actually being obsessed with what I do. And I've been fortunate. So I've found something that I'm completely obsessed about. So I read, write, work, and speak on in terms of innovation, and it's everything to me. I guess that's what's helped me in my career, is if people know that I'm obsessed about this, and they know that I'm gonna roll up my sleeves and help them with digital disruption and help them with digital transformation. They know they're getting somebody that knows their stuff and is passionate about what they do. And I think at the end of the day, the advice that I would have is to really find what you're passionate about and what you're obsessed about, so that you can help people or help yourself, advance your career. I think the advice that I would give people, and I just gave this to somebody called me and they say, I want to be in your position. I want to work in strategy and innovation. I want to do what you do. And I said to him, if you want to get a career in this space, do work for free. Reach out to leaders in the space that you want to be and literally put up your hands and do work for free. Because I know 99.9% of the world will not do that. 99% of people will meet me for coffee and they'll want to work with me and they'll want to work for us. And I give this advice, do you want to help us out? Do you want to help some of these leaders out? Do some work for free and show people what you can do and how you can help them. And I promise you, most people won't take that advice. But the people that do will always get ahead. And that's how I've got ahead in my career, is that anytime anybody had some sort of creative juice that had to do with innovation, I always put up my hand, whether it was working on the weeknights or weekends, to literally build my brand in this particular space. And it's because of that hustle, around my passion, that's why I've gotten to where I am. Most people are not willing to take that step. They're not willing to take that effort. Love to get your thoughts on this too. And why is that?
Yeah, Shawn, I don't know why that is, but I see the same thing and gives similar advice. I mean, people want to work with experts. Expertise is highly valued. And oddly, because you say most people aren't willing to put the work in, you really don't have to do that much to suddenly be like the top 10% in your space. If you just, read the last 20 books out and go interview, half of those authors, you're probably going to be in the top 10% automatically. And I think it was, I don't know, my Instagram or my Snapchat last week, I was on the road speaking and I was answering questions about public speaking. And someone asked, well, what do I speak about? And, my answer was, well, look, you can some people try to pick a trend like, oh, this topic is hot, so you should do that. That's not going to work. Like if you don't have a true passion or interest, you won't succeed in that. So I like where you started. Like you said, I'm obsessed. Like pick an area that you are passionate about and then almost like an overlapping, concentric circles is like, and what is maybe monetizable career wise or whatever, but then become an expert, read the books, interview the experts. And if you're young, Shawn, exactly like you said, go volunteer, go intern for free, go carry somebody's bag as they travel just to soak up everything that's going on around them. Most people aren't willing to do that, but that's really what it takes. And I think as you see, if you start out, even in your early 20s, you could still be in your 20s or hit 30 and be known as a top thinker, a top leader in that space.
I should be carrying your bag, Kevin. So if there's an opening to carry your bag, please let me know.
That's hilarious. I didn't think. I just might get some emails. And I travel light with only one backpack, so I think I'm good. But all right, one more thing, Shawn. So I always like to challenge our listeners to get like 1% better every single day. So what can we do today, something very actionable, so that we can become more innovative as individuals at work or in our career?
Yeah, so for those of you who are listening to this podcast, going to work in the morning, or you're getting into the office, or you're at your workout and taking a run right before going into the office, what I would say is try to get yourself fired today. Like, do something that might get you fired today, and that just means taking a risk and maybe executing an idea that everybody has been dancing around and trying out. Maybe it's booking that meeting with your boss or your main client and really showing them your value. Like, I want you to try to get yourself fired today, because what you'll realize is that at the end of the day, you won't get fired. You'll actually take a huge risk, and that will actually add value to your job or to your career. We go throughout our days playing the mediocre game. And if you actually leap outside of that and take a chance and step outside your comfort zone, you will feel something special.
I love that. And of course, if listeners, if you really do get fired, then you'll have time to go carry Shawn's bags as he travels around.
If you do get fired by taking this advice, then yes, please contact me and let's chat, and I can see how we can help you. But I promise you that probably won't happen.
Shawn, thanks for coming on the show. Tell our listeners, how can they find out more about you and your work? How can they get in touch?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is, follow me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I'm at Shawn Kanungo, and that's where I post sort of all my videos and thoughts and everything that's on my mind.
Great. Friends, you've just been mentored by innovation strategist Shawn Kanungo.
Maybe I'll do you a bit of a favor if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You'll
Please.
Probably want to do an outro here. Do you mind if I do the outro for you?
You do the outro. I love this.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to LEADx by Kevin Kruse. He's a New York Times bestselling author, Inc. 500 entrepreneur, keynote speaker on many, many topics related to productivity and leadership. The podcast is available on iTunes. Please, 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 please leave a rating and review. This guy is a machine. He's pumping out content every single day. It will totally help if you go on and put a review into iTunes. You can find the podcast on Stitcher. Go to the website, leadx.org. You can sign up for the daily leadership challenge, and you basically get a challenge every single day from the world's top leadership experts delivered right to your inbox. Honestly, by subscribing, it will change your life. Kevin will change your life. But the most important thing is to leave a rating and review. It will help out a lot. What else you need, Kevin? I think that's...
Shawn, that outro was so good. I'm just going to copy that and make that my new outro for every single episode. You'll now be on the next 100 episodes
awesome.
of the LEADx Show.
Amazing. Amazing.
Shawn, thank you for that. I appreciate those kind words and leaving the review, and thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much.